Happy New Year! Oh my
New Year.
God! It is 2026 already. I can't believe it. This is so
It
awesome.
is.
Let's see if I can
Woo.
do. Can I do the special effects? Is it
I
gonna
don't
work?
know.
There it is.
Oh, I
Special
don't know how
effects.
to do that.
Woo!
That's
Happy New
cool.
Year. Yeah, there's that, and I think there's this.
Oh,
There it is.
see, that's cool.
All right, 2026. Can't
We
believe
are
we're there
here.
already. This is crazy.
Yes, it is
The
crazy.
year went by, but you know what? I gotta tell you, this year I don't want a new year. I want like a gently used year. You
A
know?
gently used. That's
Yeah, I want
interesting.
like a model, like a 2017, 2018 year, not
Uh,
not factory fresh because
you got
those
to break
brand
it in,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
break it in
Hmm.
and they're so expensive when they come out of the
Yeah.
factory. So yeah, I kind of want. I'm good with just like a gently used year this year.
Gently, yes. Or previously loved.
Previously loved, yeah, that
Yeah.
was a rough couple of years, man. But especially this year is crazy. So
Hmm.
I think things are going to be a lot better now and settle down.
Yeah.
But welcome, Angela Pointer, to our live broadcast. Hopefully, the our audience treats you fairly well. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so
I'm in the
folks,
hot seat now
you're in
today,
the
huh?
hot seat. That's right.
Alrighty.
For folks that don't know, um, Angela is a author who wrote a book about the 24-minute. What's it called? The 24-minute what?
24 minutes to win the day.
24 minutes to win the day. We'll talk a
Hmm.
little bit about
Yeah.
that. And also, Angela is a registered nurse. I was going to say nurse, but I caught myself registered because
Fine.
there's a difference.
There is a
So,
difference, yes.
yeah. And so, actually, like you are, I don't want to say still, you are a practicing nurse,
Well,
as
I
in you
have a
have your
license,
RN,
right?
right?
Yes, I have my registered nurse license. I worked. I tell people all the time, I worked really hard for those. Even though I have some other letters behind my name, I worked really hard for
For
that
those
too.
are
RN, yes. So I
distinction
haven't. Right,
and it's not theoretical. It's you
right.
you
It's
were there
real.
in the front lines.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
high stakes, taking care of people, and then you went and you wrote this 24-minute method.
Hmm.
Um, so are you so like what happens? Are you still practicing as a
No,
nurse, like where
no,
you
I'm
go
not.
somewhere and
Mm-mm.
no, but if there was like an emergency or whatever, you are able to
I'm
jump in
licensed.
and you
Yes, I
can
have a license. That type of thing. So
right.
I'll tell you. I have been this year makes year I think it's I'm losing count. I think it's 28 as a registered nurse because after you say it for so long I'm like, oh my god, I started when
I
I was
know,
2,
no.
but I so 28 years. This will be going into year 29 as a registered nurse. Guess how many years of those 28 years was actually practicing at the bedside? I always am
20,
curious. Nope,
25.
nope.
Okay.
I'm just going to tell you 18 months as
Oh,
a
okay.
bedside in the hospital
Bedside
nurse,
nurse.
right?
Okay.
Bedside nurse in the hospital for
And the
18
rest of the
months.
time you did other
Yeah, so I
things that
did. Yeah, so I'll just walk you through. So 18 months at a hospital bedside, like normally people think of working in a hospital. The next 9 years was in various aspects of home health and hospice.
oh,
And I
okay.
always say that because I've come full circle as a hospice nurse. I have taken care of patients in their homes with hospice, and I've also had hospice with my father who passed away in 2018. So I've seen it from full circle. So I've done that. And then people ask me quite often, well, how in the world did you get into recruiting? Because I have been, you answered before you asked
Right.
about 20.
That's right.
I
Not
have
only
been
that,
in,
but you're also the president elect of the
yes.
NACR, the National Association of
Hmm.
Healthcare Recruiting. So I mean, that's quite the busy schedule there.
Yes, yes. NACR, oh, it's just a special place in my heart. I joined the organization in 2010. Yeah, 2010. So that's been about 15 years ago. And just last year, actually joined the board as president elect. So I'm excited about the organization, all the great things that we're doing, and a lot of the connections that I've made and continue to make to this point. But going back to we were talking about a little bit of my journey, I think, because I can go on rabbit trails. You
Yeah. How
did
did
say
you get
20,
into
yeah,
it? Right.
yeah,
And that was
20
where we
years.
were going.
Right. So the first basically 9 years or so has been, patient care. But then I stumbled into recruiting 20 years ago. So you were talking about the number 20. So I have been in recruiting for 20 years. And I can remember that because my son is 20 years old. He will be turning 20 this month. So I was recruited to be a recruiter by a nurse as well. She recruited me at the home health and hospice company I worked for. And when moved on to a CHRO role at a hospital in the area, and she contacted me, and when I was on maternity leave, to ask, "Hey, I'm looking for a nurse to hire as a nurse recruiter, and thought about you, and the rest is history." So to this point, I still thank her for introducing me to the world of recruiting. I found my niche. I used to say this when I was leading teams, is that I do a different type of nursing. I get to lead the people, to find the people, to take care of the people. So
Okay.
I have enjoyed doing that. So I've been started out as a nurse recruiter. I'm recruiting actually in Atlanta, Sally. That sadly that hospital doesn't exist anymore, but it's where cut my teeth in recruiting, and have started as a nurse recruiter. Then that particular hospital, I became the sole recruiter, recruiting for everything in the hospital. And then I was recruited. That's a story of my life. I won't go into a lot of that. Recruited to out of state to North Carolina. Was a nurse recruiter there, um, and actually did a little stint as a nurse manager of the internal staffing resource pool there, and then came back as a manager of nurse recruitment at that system. And then I've been leading TA teams since then, until about 7 months ago, when I took a brave step of moving into the world of solopreneurship. I know you and I were chatting briefly before we got on. This isn't for everybody. And so I know sometimes people will ask, well, how in the world, why did you do that? We can maybe talk about that a little bit later, but that's the story. How about that?
That's the story, and you're sticking to it, right?
Sticking to it,
Sticking
yes.
to it. So, all right, there's a couple of things to unpack there. The 4Ds, the minute, 24-minute phone screen, and
Yeah,
something that you call disco recruiting.
yeah.
But why don't we start with something that I think is going to be, applicable to everybody:
Mhm.
nurses, non-nurses, nurse recruiters, non-nurse recruiters, and that's the productivity question. Everyone talks about
Mhm.
more time, better tools, longer focus blocks, but your method is 24 minutes, which is very interesting because you don't know this about me, but I have 25-minute sets that I talk about.
Mm.
My sourcing set and my sourcing block that I talk about is at 25 minutes. So I'm really curious what that is. But your
Yeah.
your method is a 24-minute method. What's the biggest lie modern productivity culture tells us about that your method just directly challenges head on?
What is the base lie, you think?
What's the
That's one
biggest lie
the
about
biggest lie?
productivity
Yeah.
that your 24-minute method is like, debunking?
So one thing I will say, kind of, and it goes into this too, and I talk about it in the book, is the myth of multitasking. People feel like they can do so many things at one time, and you know this, and we all know this. Technically, you can't. There's no such thing as truly
No,
multitasking,
I like to
right?
call it hyper threading,
Right,
or
hyper threading,
yeah, like do
exactly,
this, do
because
this, do
you're
this, do
really
this, do
not
this, do this, do
right.
this.
It
Okay. Do A, do B, do C, go back to A, go back to B, go back to C. So it's not
right.
really A, B, and C at the same time. It's just going back and forth pretty quickly.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, you really are only going to be focusing on one thing at a time.
Yeah,
And so really, and I'll tell you kind of how the whole thing came about, if you don't mind,
of
because it
course,
was really interesting, because
please.
some people write about things that, they're
That's why I
have their
asked.
PhD, they have their PhDs and they've studied it for years, all this kind of stuff, and they're an expert. This is something that I'm living, and it literally started, as I mentioned to you, 7 months ago. I launched my new business, and I had a very interesting experience. My very first day, quote unquote, in business, started my, had my, got my email up for my
Mhm.
business and my new email account. And guess what? I had a clear inbox and I had a clear calendar.
Oh yeah,
And
day one. Yeah,
yeah,
inbox zero attained. Yeah.
right. And I'll
Yeah.
be honest with you, I haven't had that in a while because
That lasted
even
what, 5 minutes?
no, it actually, yeah, last 5 minutes, yeah. Because even in my last couple of organizations I, worked for and worked with, I started day one with emails already and stuff on my calendar.
That's good.
So
Yeah, it's true.
it
Yeah.
was weird to, and I have a screenshot of my
Uh-huh.
Outlook that day of literally nothing and so clear. And so I started thinking about, okay, how am I going to fill that time? Because now the world is different for me, and, I'm not going to be twiddling my thumbs, because just because if you work for yourself or you're a solopreneur or self-employed, you still work. Is that right, Shelly?
Do I still
You
work?
still work. Yeah, we still work, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
There's still
yeah.
work. There's still things to be done.
Yeah, I got work to
And
do. I got a bunch of work to
it's
do.
right. And
I'm doing it right now while I'm multitasking. No, I'm just kidding.
no, but you're doing the work, right? We're doing the
Yeah,
work.
I'm
So
doing the work. Yep, I am doing the
right.
work.
And so so now you have to kind of frame it differently, and so what you're going to be doing. So one of the things I do like to do is walk, and I walk in my neighborhood. It's therapeutic and a lot of other reasons. And literally, this idea came to my head about, I don't even know exactly how it came, about 24 minutes. And I'm like, as far as a framework in time, and blocks. So I came back and did a little research on um, micro blocks, different things like that. And there's quite a bit out there on 25.
Hmm.
So but I'm a little different. I think you might know about me, or we'll learn about me. I don't want to do just what everybody's doing. So I'm like, has anybody written anything about
I don't know if
20?
everybody's doing the 25-minute method. I still teach it all the time.
Right. And I'm
But
not
yeah,
debunking it. Don't get me. We're not going.
no,
Yeah,
I
I'm not.
think it's very similar. I think we have it. We're pretty
It's
aligned
a
on it. Yeah.
similar concept, because actually, now that I think about it, I feel like I wrote this book, but I'm like, I even have a chapter in here that is on why 24 and not 25. And for me, it's I like no meaning and significance. And so I was even looking at, and how it started for me is looking at the fact that we have 24 hours a day, and that is something that we all get the same amount of. Nobody, you get more, you don't get 25 hours in a day and I get 24, somebody else gets 23. We all get the same amount of time. And it's interesting, how we feel it is how we choose to. So the first thing I started looking at is, okay, I get 24 hours in a day. Let me focus on my first 24 minutes. And what do I do in my first 24 minutes? Say that real fast, of the day. So it started, kind of, this framework for me started with being very intentional about what I do in the first 24 minutes of my day, and then what I do in the last 24 minutes of my day. And then it's kind of morphed from there. And I actually even got to the place of, and I do talk about this a little bit in the book, about
Okay.
I began doing 6 very purposeful 24-minute blocks in my day.
Okay.
And so you find, like, I had, and it's not really worth mentioning here. I had my it's going to be individual to you. For me, it was the 6 must do's, the important things for me in my day that I needed to do, and I planned that out. My 6 24-minute blocks. So basically, and when you want to talk about the 4D in the book, and I talk about it in the introduction. I don't want to make this all about the book. We'll talk about, I'll mention this and we can talk about some other things. But the 4Ds refers to, kind of, for each of the chapters, there's discover, define, do, and debrief.
Okay.
So it's about kind of discovering. There's a lot of I like to talk, I mean, even being on here now, I tell stories. So there's some stories of my experiences in life, not just in the last 7 months of being in this business, but then also just things that I've learned in kind of retrospect at this time. So I talk about all those things, and then actually give some very practical tips, because that's the do section. So every chapter, there's 24. I'm very purposeful. So it's 24 minutes to win the day. There's 24 chapters, and each chapter has a do section of things that you can do. So there's a lot of things around kind of that 24-minute method.
Now, can you read a chapter in 1 minute?
Um,
Probably not.
Probably not.
That'd be too much to ask, right?
That'll
24
be
minutes
too
to win the
much.
day, 1 chapter a minute.
One
There you
chapter,
go. Day
yeah, you
one.
can't do it. And so one of the things that I
Uh,
write, and like how to use it, is there's 24, as I mentioned, there's 24 chapters. I wouldn't recommend trying. I don't think you can read it in a minute.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that
I don't
doesn't
know.
sound about it.
Because
That doesn't
it's
sound right.
not, I mean, they're not that long because that's the whole thing. The book is not, because sometimes you think 24 chapters, they're short. Because I actually don't, I'm not going to be I'm not quite an avid reader yet, working on that. I guess I did so much reading in grad school that it's kind of different. It's sitting a little different with me. But what I also like for people to do, and what I like to do sometimes with certain books, is actually take it all in. So not just read it cover to cover, but what I do recommend is read a chapter, kind of take it, do the exercise, kind of mull over it a little bit, and then before moving on to your next one. But I
Right.
will say this. I don't think you can read a chapter in a minute, but you definitely can read a chapter in less than 24 minutes. How about that?
There you go. So I'd like that. 24 minutes per chapter. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's actually, I'll say one, I think I already said it's the last thing, but this is the real last thing. And one of the things I even did too, and I think I'll talk about this, is that many of the chapters I kind of wrote at least the initial draft in 24. Or my writing periods, because that's one of the things I do, 24 minutes of writing. So I'd write for 24 minutes and then stop. So I really wrote in
Okay.
24-minute increments.
Oh, cool. Okay, gotcha.
hmm
Yeah. Yeah. So my just to compare them, so my 25-minute sets are it's something that I adopted or adapted from a couple of actually different research studies that were conducted. There was a research study that was conducted on um, attention and ADHD, and
hmm
because there's actually some there's some very legitimate um, causes that are physiological, and there are
Right.
some key differences in the ADHDer's brain. And so I was researching that. So there was like this ADHD study, part one, and part two was a sleep study, or a study about sleep and the effect of sleep. That interestingly, one of those weird things that happens in science is they corroborated each other. So the
Mm.
conclusions from both research studies had similarities, and here's where they conclude, or where they part of what they did to study both ADHD and sleep deprivation basically was to run a test on participants that would it's a button that you click,
Mm.
and they would show a dot on the screen, somewhere on the
Oh.
screen.
hmm
You've seen this
Yeah,
test.
I have.
They
Yeah.
use it for all kinds of other things. So
Yeah.
it's pretty standard scientific
hmm
test. And they would push the button when they would see the dot, and that was it.
Right.
So there was a
hmm
control group and so on.
Right.
So the result of that test in both studies
hmm
was very conclusive in this one regard. Coincidentally, not because they both were thinking about that wasn't the hypothesis, but it was conclusive in the regard that it doesn't matter how much you slept, how well you slept, how little you slept. So your quality and duration of sleep didn't matter in this regard, and even whether or not you were sleep deprived didn't matter. However, all stages of sleep deprivation, whether you were alert or sleepy or whatever, they all had this thing in common. And that is that for the first 25 minutes of the test, the performance was at a particular level. And then after 25 minutes, it sharply dropped, and
Mm.
it didn't come
Interesting.
back regardless of the length of the test. So
Mm.
basically, people were at their best no matter what their status was. So you could be at your best when you're sleepy, which is not very good,
Right.
or you could be at your best when you're wide awake and refreshed. But doesn't matter what the condition was, you were at your best for the first 25 minutes
25.
only. After that,
Mhm.
that depreciated. So even if you started at awesome at 20 minutes, at 26 minutes, 27 minutes, you started
Started
decreasing.
DT. Yeah.
And the same thing happened with ADHD, that it didn't matter what type of ADHD, what the conditions were, whether they had music or were
Mhm.
stimulated or what. They all had the same thing. For the first 25 minutes, they could focus, and then it just dropped off. So it is proven without a
Yeah.
doubt that after 25 minutes, now it could be 23, it could be 24, right?
Yeah. Just pick a number. Yeah.
Yeah, but 26 or whatever, 26 and a half, your ability to focus immediately starts
Mhm.
declining. Now, for some people, it goes bloom. For some people, it just sort of, tapers off, but it never gets any better. So the conclusion is after 25 minutes of activity, take a break. Now,
Right.
here's the other interesting thing that happened from both those research studies. They both realized that the rest period or the break
Mhm.
period did not matter as long as it was more than 3 minutes. So
Mhm.
anything less than 3 minutes, people's performance didn't return to whatever it was before. Had to
Right.
be more than 3 minutes. And if there were repeated tests in the same wake period, that after a couple of them, 2 or 3, they needed to take a 7-minute break.
Mhm.
So the recommendation is to take at least a 3-minute break, but at most a 7-minute break.
7-minute break.
Because
Mhm.
after 7 minutes, it doesn't matter whether it's
Right.
10 or 50 or another day. But
Right.
between 3 and 7 was enough to get you reset.
Right.
So 5-minute, just call it 5-minute break. So the 25-minute method is every half hour, 25 minutes of focus, 5-minute break,
Minutes of break.
25 minutes of
7 minutes
focus,
of
break.
focus. Mhm.
And if you're
Yeah.
going to do more, my rule is if you're going to do more than 2 sets back to back. So if you have a 1-hour period of set A, 30 minutes, 25 break, 25 break,
Mhm.
then make at least a 7-minute break before your next block.
For
That's
your
it.
next block.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it. That's
yeah.
the whole
So
method.
very similar, very similar. Because I actually have things about kind of that cycle, just what you talked about,
Mhm.
the focus time, the break time, and that those are very key. And I think it's Pomodoro
The Pomodoro, yeah.
principle, yeah,
Pomodoro
principles,
method or the
yeah,
tomato
method,
timer
right,
method. Yep.
right, exactly. Yeah, but there was something that you said that it sparked something. I know we didn't talk about it, but I just want to mention it because I'm like, this is my soapbox, right? You talked about sleep, and this is something
Mhm.
that I'm on. It's not really recruiting related per se, but I'm kind of on a bit of my own personal campaign to rid us from that phrase or question, what keeps you up at night? Do you ask that question?
I when I prep people for coming on the show and
Mhm.
they ask me what to talk about, I say talk about whatever you're passionate about
Mhm.
or whatever gets you out of bed in the morning or whatever
Yeah.
keeps you up at night. But
Mhm.
it's like, the whole point of that is to say, look, let's talk about what's hot, what's on your
And
mind.
passion.
If
Right.
if
Right.
it's keeping you up or if it's getting you out of bed or it's something you're passionate about, it's kind of the
That's
same
what I'm talking
idea,
about.
right? So
Yes.
I know what you mean by the keeping you up at night because I mean the reality is that really nothing work related
Nothing's
should
worth keeping me up.
I was
Yeah.
nothing
That,
work
'cause that's
related
yeah.
should keep you. But the truth is that your work stress may make it so that you have restless sleep
Mhm.
or stay up later than you would, but yeah, but
Yeah,
keeping
those
you
are
up all
things,
night, that's
yeah,
kind of
and
tough.
keeping you up. And I know it's semantics. I don't think people really we truly mean it, but sometimes I think what happens is subconsciously is there a thought that particularly whether you're a recruiter or a leader or anything that you're supposed to be up at night and you're not supposed to sleep. I actually commented, someone posted this a couple of days ago, maybe even yesterday, and I made a comment because it strikes a nerve with me or a chord whenever I see people talk about it. I'm like, yes, yes, somebody's talking about the importance of sleep because you're no good without rest. And
Yeah,
so
without some
yeah, so
rest.
I tell people, yeah, when they
Yeah.
ask me how much what keeps me up at night, and I answer nothing. Because I now with that said, I think what you're meaning, what the meaning when people ask what keeps you up at night or whatever is
Is what's
what's
stressing you.
concerned, right? What are
Yeah.
concerned? Now, I'm human just like anybody else. I have things that are stressful or concerning and that kind of thing. But one of the things that's super important to me is I'm not going to be my best if I'm not rested. And I will tell you, there is a lot of power. And I know there's research to this too, which we won't get into, but for me, just even the experience, the lived experience of, I know what it's like to get sleep and to get to sleep well at night, wake up and be refreshed. And I know what it's like not to, and getting sleep is better. So it definitely does impact. And one of the things that I'm learning too is, I'm getting older, and as you get older, there is a benefit to getting more sleep, and so I'm seeing that in my personal life. But anyway, thanks for letting me take my little rabbit trail on sleep, and thank you for sharing kind of those studies
Of
from
course.
from a sleep perspective and ADHD. So it's very interesting. I know, and I mentioned too that there's there's a lot of people way smarter than me that have studied these types of things in terms of the time. Timing and things like that. But for me, it's not so much, and I will say this, it's not, while there is a certain element of the timing of 24 and that type of thing, but it's really more about intentionality is where I would probably leave you with, is being super intentional about your time. And so that's one thing I do now, like my Calendly appointments, whenever I schedule discovery calls, they are intentionally branded as 24 minutes. Now with
Mhm.
Calendly, it's kind of hard to do it that way, but as far as it literally be on the calendar for 24 minutes. But if you go to book an appointment with me, you're gonna get you go to my page that says your intentional 24 minutes. So what it does is just helps me to be very intentional about our conversation. And I actually had two 24-minute calls earlier this morning. So oh, and thanks. I see you're putting my LinkedIn there in
Yeah, I
the,
scrolled it
yeah,
a
yeah,
bit. Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
good way to get
yeah.
a hold of me. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so we talked about the 4 Ds and, the 24-minute method, and also, the kind of the answer to my question was, what is the biggest lie that you're solving? And, so to summarize the 4 Ds and the 24-minute method, what would you say is so different from the typical advice about what you're talking about? So what is the biggest difference between your 24-minute method and you know and the or what is the bad
Yeah.
advice people get that you fix? That's what I want to hear.
Yeah. Bad advice. Good
That your
question.
method fixes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and I'm gonna kind of maybe harp a little bit more on this doing more with less, right?
Oh,
And we
okay,
think
got
it
it.
right is that, and at the end of the day, we still have the same amount of time. So it's not so much about do you need more time or do you need less time. It's about being very purposeful with the time that you do have and being very intentional. And so while, as I said earlier, it's not necessarily about 24 to to the letter and to the number per se, but it's just more about the intentionality around it, and it helps you to be more focused. And one of the things that I'm working on literally this morning is even a framework or a template for a 24-minute phone screen with recruiters. And so just thinking about just timing, because and one thing I think you and I were talking about a little bit before we got on is this whole thought process now around I mean AI. How many times have you heard AI in 2025?
So much that I'm numb to it.
Yeah, we're right. And so you're hearing AI all the time. And so one of the things you also hear about, and I know there's mixed feelings about AI and phone screens. Um, you know,
Yeah, there
yeah,
is.
you want to
You're
talk
talking
about that?
about
Yeah.
doing a candidate phone screen using AI, but
Yeah.
why don't you tell us what the mixed feelings are? You
Yeah.
know what
So
mine are.
right. So here's the thought, because I know I was in a I guess maybe a round table or something recently, and the comment came up or the question came up kind of um, off the cuff. And so, kind of some of the initial reaction from this is a group of recruiters is,
Mhm.
oh, absolutely not. We, that is the phone screen is the job of the recruiter. And
It
so,
is, but
right. And
but
so,
but
but
wait a
using,
minute.
yeah,
The
yeah,
wait,
go
wait,
ahead.
wait, wait, wait. But the AI, so these AI screens are not the recruiter phone screen.
No, no, no. I'm talking about the recruiter phone screen. So
Yeah,
they're
AI
right.
screens are not recruiter phone screens. They're pre-evaluation.
Hmm.
So it's replacing the application process
Right.
where you might fill out a. So I think the right way to use it is normally you go on a website and you apply for a job and they
Right.
ask all these things that you got to fill out. So you got to
Hmm.
fill them out. It's the clunky. It's like, oh my god, they're asking me for this and that and the other. The AI screen is more of like that preliminary chat where, and it could a lot of times it's done really well through chatbots where they're like, "What job are you interested in? Great. What's your name? What's your email?" It's that. It's not a full
Oh, well,
technical
no, it
interview.
is. Actually, I'll push back just a little bit on that, because there are actually a couple of two that I know of in particular that it's beyond that. That's one
Then that's
step.
an interview, not a
Right.
screen.
It's but it's for the recruiter. It's in the place of the recruiter,
So that's
or
where.
in
Tell me
step, but
about
that's
that.
what I'm talking about.
What are
Yes.
the mixed feelings on that?
Yeah,
That's what I
so
want to
there
hear
is a
about.
thought process around should that be done by AI or should that be done by a recruiter?
Yep.
Because what happens
What are
is
the pros
when
and
the
cons?
people that are using it, there's, from what I understand, because I personally
Uh,
haven't used it yet. I've done some demos and seen some things, and I know of a couple of organizations that have implemented this primarily in roles where there's high supply and lower demand. So you have
okay.
so many candidates, and so as a way, and this is where maybe the pro comes in, is a way for a candidate to feel like they're more than a number and that they actually had an opportunity to talk with someone,
Talk with
whether
somebody.
it's actually an AI agent, but they actually talked and had a conversation with someone about the role and all that type of thing. So, and basically, what in this instance, what the organizations that are using this, it's their way of now taking that information to decide who's going to move on to the next stage. So
Okay.
and with
It
that, I
is
think
a
what's, yeah.
filter.
Right, it's kind of a filter, and candidates, to my understanding, can they do have to opt in, and they understand this is an AI, this is an AI conversation, so they know that. Some of the, and I'll go on the pros, I think from a candidate perspective, it feels like you're getting a number, you're getting a touch point with the
Mhm.
organization. I think the other thing becomes in the world of timing and scheduling and things of that nature. You can schedule your phone screen with the AI agent at 2 o'clock in the morning if you want. Recruiters are not going to be working for the most part at 2 o'clock in the morning. So maybe there's pros from that perspective, from a productivity and efficiency and that type of thing. But this is where maybe some of the cons come in, is just, and I think some of it is there's just that initial thought process from the recruiter that you're taking my job. AI is replacing me, that type of thing, and it may feel like it's creeping in that area. And so what I
Mhm.
would say, I'm not going to say one way or the other. I think there's pros and there's cons, and I think it depends on how you're using it. Um, I know for we are in this world is definitely very relational, and recruiting is, I always talk about my 3 R's for recruiting. It's relationships, and that's always number one, resources and results. And so in this relationship mode that we're in, that's important. That's a human interaction that you don't really have. Maybe some people might think they have a relationship with their AI, but it's yeah, I see the eyes. I'm just thinking about some crazy, I don't know if it's a movie or something
Oh
that,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
where people like they are having all kind, they're whatever, with their AI, but
Did you know I just had this conversation with someone?
uh-huh.
Um, there was a movie. There, I shouldn't say. There is a movie
Mhm.
with oh, famous actor, famous actor, famous actor. Um,
You can,
Al
okay.
Pacino. There's a movie 2002,
Hmm. I'm gonna have to Google this.
2002 called Simone, but it's spelled S1M0NE. So it's Sim
Oh,
One, and it's all about an AI, a completely AI person that the media falls in love with, and everybody thinks that they're a real person.
real.
This is 2002.
That's what I was about to say. 2002.
Yeah.
That's what, 24 years ago.
And that already existed back then, that idea of
Hmm.
that.
The
Yeah,
idea.
think about it. Mhm.
Yeah, but yeah. So I think that I'm not gonna come here and and say one way or the other. I think that as with anything, you evaluate what works for you and that type of thing. But I just think it's interesting what what's possible now,
So
and
are
the
you
fact, yeah.
saying that the interview, the recruiter interview, the recruiter phone screen with AI is or isn't a viable option?
Okay, I'm gonna do the infamous "it depends,"
Yeah,
right?
so it depends on what, right?
It depends on what's your goal and what's your aim.
Okay, what's an
Um,
aim where you would use it that it would be good?
Yeah, I think one could be, and I think I may have mentioned it before, is from a candidate experience perspective for
Mhm.
roles where
Where you,
you
yeah.
have,
Oh, at
yeah,
least I got
yeah,
the ability to
right. That
people
you at
feel
least
like they were able to talk to
they
someone.
talk to
Okay.
somebody, even though they know it was an
They
AI
knew it was an
agent, but
AI,
they
but at least they
know
felt like they made
I
it
felt I got,
explode.
I did
Yep.
something versus the black, people talk about the infamous black hole. So they
Where it
feel
just
like
information
that
goes
there
away
is,
and nobody
yeah. So I
knows.
mean, yeah, from that standpoint, and then maybe from the standpoint of recruiter efficiency and just with time when you have large candidate pools. I know I've seen candidate pools in the hundreds, and then actually, I can't even believe it. Once I saw a rec that had 1,000 candidates in it, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So I think from a standpoint of being able to work smart, because we know we're already talking about efficiencies and things like that. And so there's only so much time in a day. We all get the same amount of time, but how do you work smart with that? And so that you're able to um, get in front of people quickly, be able to screen down that type of thing. So I think in those instances, it could be beneficial. Like I said, it depends. But you also want to be mindful of really being able to have those human connections at the beginning when there needs to be. So I think for where there's higher supply than demand, maybe that works. But in situations where there's less, the supply is less and the demand is high,
Hmm.
you're wanting to get in front of them, and yet that experience is a little different. So
Right.
that's my 2 cents.
Right. So if it's you won't normally wouldn't be able to get access to a recruiter because of the volume of applicants.
Hmm.
It would make sense. But if you're already having a hard time as a recruiter actually getting somebody to on the phone, then automating it kind of I think it's I want to say logical, but
Hmm.
if you don't do phone screens at all, you can introduce AI as phone screening
Yeah,
because it
possibly,
adds an
right.
extra level of engagement and allows you to provide that access to candidate. But if you are already doing the phone screens and you are having a hard time filling your calendar, in other words,
Hmm.
you can't find enough candidates to phone screen,
Right.
then why would you want to automate it in the first place?
Exactly.
It's not a
That's
big part of your
exactly
day anyway.
right. Because if it's not a time, right, it's not a a time saver. It's not an issue of time. You need to be in front of every candidate you can get in front of. So I see that from that standpoint. That as with anything, there's not one. We haven't invented the secret sauce. Either one of us have we, Shelly?
Not for this.
Not for.
I do have
Yeah,
a secret sauce for ribs.
yeah. You got a secret. Oh, don't get me started mm, on ribs. It's
Yeah, no, I'm not getting it.
yeah.
We talked about this at dinner the other
Yeah,
night.
we did.
Oh yeah, we
Oh,
did.
yeah, we had conversations about ribs.
But
Yep.
let's take it back to so we talked about productivity
Mhm.
and time blocking and why time blocking systems usually die. Well, we didn't really talk about it, but we talked about a lot of time blocking is like block off an hour. That doesn't really
Yeah.
work, right?
Mm-mm.
So you need to block off that 25-minute plus the break. So I'd say block off 30, but
Mhm.
right. So one of the things
Yeah.
you can do with calendars, here's a little hack. A lot of these calendars, like for example, for me on Google, I can send someone a link that allows them to book themselves on my calendar, and I have different kinds of links depending on the
Right.
meeting,
Mhm.
and those have different rules. So, for example, if it's a phone screen, the rule of that meeting request is that it will schedule a 5 minute, gap
Mhm.
after the before and after. So if you book that meeting at let's say 2 p.m., it blocks my calendar from
Right.
1:55 to
Too.
2:35
Mhm.
so that it gives you those 5 minutes to prep and 5 minutes to take notes before my next meeting. Otherwise, you'll end up in a 2 to 2:30, 2:30 to
Right.
3, right?
I
So
despise
online
that.
calendars will help you do the same thing
Mhm.
with your own time as well. But I wanted to talk about why it actually works to do these 24-minute blocks, especially for people that are overloaded, burned out, and or people who already are or think they are good at managing their time. Why do you think it work? Why do you think this is an improvement, even if you're already good at time
Mm.
management? Why do you think this is an improvement if you are burned out? Why does this work?
Yeah. Good question, because for me, it's not as much about the actual 24 minutes themselves. Like,
Okay.
was it
It's not
24,
about the
25?
24
It's
minutes.
not about, I mean,
Yep.
even though, yes, the
Yeah,
book
yeah,
is
yeah.
called
So it's
24
not
minutes,
about
but
the time.
it's
It's
not
about
necessarily, it's about two things. It's about blocks and doing things in blocks, and particularly small blocks.
So being intentional, being
Yeah, being
purposeful.
it's really more about being intentional and being purposeful. And another thing is, you talked about, there are people that are very good at time management. That's not something for them. This is not something they need help with per se. But I think sometimes when you look at what are you doing in your time. So one of the exercises I have in the book is kind of a time audit, looking at what take and I do this with the 24-minute timer. 24-minute timer. Look at your calendar previous day, all the things that you did, kind of putting them into, was it meaningful, was it reactionary, or was it reaction or noise? Then it also helps you to think about how you're using your time. When you mentioned about back to back, so
Mhm.
I've done this before. This is one things that I don't miss. I was saying earlier that I started my business and with my new email account and clear calendar and everything. One thing that I didn't want to get back into is being booked back to back, or then being triple and quadruple booked. I lived that land for quite some time, especially the first when you move up in leadership, you're just constantly in meetings all the time,
Yeah.
and you're back to back, and it just doesn't help you. And I remember, and I'll be honest, I was guilty. It's been a while since I've done full desk recruiting full time, because of being in leadership. But I love to recruit, so I love recruiting. But having those back to back phone screens, that doesn't help. And I like, because of, as you mentioned, of being able to use the calendar tools. Google does that. I think Outlook has something different. There's a lot of different ones that have things that you can use, because it helps you to be intentional, and also give the people give your full attention to that time, and be mindful. This is the other thing that I think is important too, is honoring people's time.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm a real stickler to appointments, and starting on time and ending on time, and be doing that. And so if you're constantly back to back, what happens when you run over once, that's your day, right? Because you 1 minute, one
Oh, it's
meeting
a
runs over
domino
five
effect.
minutes. It's a
Yeah.
constant domino effect. And
Yep.
particularly, and to me, I don't care whether it's a phone screen with a candidate that a high demand, low supply role, or a high supply, low demand role. Still, regardless of who it is, and that is giving the individuals that their attention that they need. And so I think it's crucial to start on time, to end on time, and to be mindful of their time. So I'm sorry, I think I went out on a rabbit trail, but you were asking about or remind me, you were talking about
What
what
is
was useful.
so why does this work
Oh, why
even
does
when
it
people
work? Yeah.
yeah, why does it work even when
Yeah.
people are
I think
already good at time management or burnt out?
yeah.
Why does it cut through the.
I think for burnout, it kind of gets you back to thinking about what it is that you're doing, and really thinking um about how you're spending your time. And so that's what I mentioned about doing the time audit, to look at what are the things that you're doing, because we all have things that are critical to what we need to do, as far as our mission, our personal mission, our organization's mission, things of that nature. But one thing I'll also think about too is, and I tend to get the same messed up sometimes, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. You have the thing that I survived the meeting that should have been an email. Did I say that right this time?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
This meeting
So
should have been an email, right? Right,
right.
right.
And so, and I've seen it go both ways, because to me, you have a meeting that should have been an email. And then sometimes you have an email or series of emails that needs to be a meeting.
Yeah,
And so
just
kind of
way too
knowing,
many emails doesn't need to be an email, right?
right. Because kind of a rule, and I don't really have, but after you've gone back and forth, to me, after two times, it's like at this point, it's time to have a conversation, because we're not going to do this back and forth in email. So I think that's kind of important too. So I think it's it helps from a standpoint of being intentional about what you're doing, aligning yourself with your purpose. I talk a lot about that just in my life in general, because one of the things, as we were talking about my journey, is I became very intentional about my personal mission. And and now I can articulate it. I think, have you ever done this? I know probably I can think of two different sessions or things that I've been in the last 5 years where you do an exercise to create your personal mission statement. Have you
Hmm.
ever done those?
Yeah, I've done that.
And
Different
I've
ways, but
done
yeah.
those, years, probably within the last 5 years, at least maybe a couple of times. And I'm just gonna be honest with me. You do it, you do the exercise, and you don't. For me, I never really came back to it. It didn't stick for me. Maybe it did for you or some other people, but I haven't done that. But I've gotten very intentional within the last, like I said, probably 7 months ago, around my mission. And so, and articulate it and I remind myself of it every day. And that is to use the time, talent, and treasure that I've been given to make a meaningful impact in the life of others. And so that is my North Star, sort of like my guiding, what my principle for me personally. And then I look at how am I spending my time and then my treasure and my talent. So particularly on the talent and the treasure, we all have different amounts of that, but from a time standpoint, we all have the same amount. So I'm like, is
Mm.
this meaningful? Because another thing I would recommend too for individuals, whether you're great at time management, whether you need help with time management or anywhere in between, is as you're looking at things, are the things you're doing aligning to what your mission is, the mission of your personal mission or the mission of your organization. We love I don't know about your experiences in organizations, but I know with mine, we love meetings. we, we love meetings. I can tell you in healthcare, we love to meet, and then you have the meetings before the meetings and the
Yeah.
meetings after the meetings.
And then you know what
Yeah.
is really funny that I've noticed is people still expect you to have the same amount of time to do
Mhm.
your job. So they still think that
Right.
you're going to do your 40 hours a week,
Mhm.
even though, so if you think like you got 20 hours of meetings this week, that only leaves you 20 hours of work, but they
Right.
expect you to still work 40 hours, especially when you do virtual work. Not that you can do that as a nurse, but so now
No, but
basically
I,
you
I
have
get it.
40
Yeah.
hours of work and 20 hours of meetings. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah, and I think that, and particularly, because I've heard, some people may think that, oh, that's what leaders do. You run meetings all day. Um,
And then
yes and no.
you have 40
Right.
hours
You
to do your
still
job.
have things,
Right.
because the further you progress in your leadership in terms of position, I'm gonna talk about. I'll say this. I always one of my little Angela isms is that not everybody with the not how do I say it? Not everyone with the title is a leader, and not all
Mm.
leaders are true with the all leaders. I'm just totally butchering it up. I can't get it out right today, but
Just
my
because you
point
have
is
a leadership
a
title doesn't mean
title.
you're a
It
leader.
doesn't mean
Right.
you're a leader, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll say is, and you don't have to have a leadership title
To be
to
a
be a
leader.
leader.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I'm sorry I couldn't get it quite out, but you
Yeah.
understood my point.
I totally
And
did.
so, like, what people sometimes the thought is that you're in meetings, you're leading, and that's a part of leading. And yes, that's true. And so, while you may not have as many tactical things that you're responsible for, you still have things to do. And then most of the time, meetings do require prep work and or require there's
Action items.
action items, right, and
Mhm.
things to do. So you're right, you have to have the time. Like I did a but my own time study once, actually I've done this several times, of looking at evaluating my meetings. And especially, it really doesn't matter which organization, but looking at how much time do I spend in meetings, and particularly sometimes in meetings with some of the same people on the same topics. I'm like, how many are we going to beat this down to a pulp here? And so just really thinking about who all needs to be in the meetings. What do we need? What are we meeting about? And then can we be efficient with it versus having to have so many different meetings? So
Yeah.
I can be on my soapbox of talking about
Right.
meetings.
I gotcha. I
Yeah.
gotcha.
I think you get the gist, yeah.
Now I want to switch a little bit with a few minutes that we got left and ask you about the tension between identities and like I have this, and I think you probably do
Mhm.
too. So I have this identity uh, as a consultant and speaker in the industry, and I also have
Mhm.
this identity as like the guy that does this job. So I got a job,
Mhm.
you know, and I have this online identity, and there's a tension there. But you have your two identities are even more further apart. At least the job that I do is related to what I do, but you have this identity as a nurse and a recruiter, and you're not
Hmm.
actually practicing as a nurse, but you have this identity as a nurse. So how
Interesting.
have you how have you, I guess you've chosen to stay a nurse
Mhm.
and become an author and become a recruiter, right?
Mhm.
How do you manage that tension between those, like, almost different people?
Yeah. You know what? I've never really thought about it that way as tension, but it's
Not in
very
a bad
interesting.
way. I
But I
mean,
mean, but or
you
just
know,
the difference, right?
yeah,
Because
it's not bad tension.
right,
It's
but it's just different. Yeah. So,
yeah, it's two identities. And
yeah.
you have to, you can't be a nurse and a recruiter because you're I mean, if what you do for a living every day is you help people
Right.
get hired, then your job is recruiter. But you have
Right.
this other identity that is very much, you can activate nurse mode instantly.
Right.
S-
So,
So it's still part of you. How do you
yeah.
manage that tension?
Yeah, I think for me it's more of a it's kind of different. I went into, and we do not have time to talk about this about even why I became a nurse. That'll be another.
Right, that's
That's
before
a
that.
whole
That's the
episode
before that.
just for that.
We got the after
But
hours. This is the before hours, right?
yeah, but this is the before hours. But just think about, everyone has a story of why they are doing whatever. And so for nurses, for many nurses, you have your story of why you became a nurse, right? And so mine, there's a story behind that. And for me, it's not so much about the actual practice of
Mhm.
nursing, is more as making a difference. And how can I make a
Okay.
difference? So
Okay.
the way I look at, as I
Make a
mentioned
difference with
before,
both.
right, I do in a different way. So I support nursing, but I support the
Yeah.
nursing in a different way, by
And
making
because
sure.
you are a
Right,
nurse, you
right,
also have that perspective. And you don't. First of all, you don't need to be, in my opinion, and you don't need to be the job to recruit for the job.
yeah, you know
You,
what?
you
Yep,
don't.
you
But
don't.
I think if you used to be a architect and you're recruiting architects, it makes it easier
Yeah,
to talk to architects because you have common language.
right,
Not that you have to be an architect to recruit architects, but so you have
right,
both. You live in both
right.
worlds,
You live,
and that
yeah,
helps
that's,
you with that tension. I was
yeah,
just curious if you have any
yeah,
advice for those of us that have, maybe, they used to be an engineer and are now a recruiter, but they're
or
still an engineer.
right. So
I don't know.
couple things for me, I'll just tell you what I do. So for me, I always keep my license. We talked about that earlier. So I keep a license, and so I've lived and worked in 6 states now. So some states require CEU, some don't. In Virginia, where I
Okay.
live now, we do. So I do, stay. I like to stay abreast. I'm very involved. In the American Nurses Association, as well as my state association. So that is just my story. So I don't know for other people, like for example, the architect or someone that has
There's usually
another.
some
Just
sort of state.
everybody's
Yeah.
got their
Right.
association or thing they can be a
And they have
part
to
of.
keep up, just to keep your RN,
Right.
you have to stay up
You
to
have to
date
keep
with your.
licensure and things
Yep,
like that. Yeah.
exactly.
Now I know what some people. Now this has not been my experience, but I know of some individuals who have gone into recruiting with a nursing background, and they still may pick up a shift here and there. That type. I didn't do that in my. I've been in recruiting the last 20 years, so I haven't done that. But I know that there's some people that have done that. So that is an option for some people if you still want to get your feet wet. So for me, kind of when you put the whole tension, what I feel sometimes is, yes, I'm a nurse by background. I'm also a recruiter, and while, the last, I would say, gosh, 12, 13 years, I've been leading teams. And so this is where honestly I do have a little bit of tension, and I've experienced that with being either the recruiter or the leader. So I've been in
Oh,
roles
yeah,
where I
okay.
was
That's
the
interesting.
leader of recruiting,
And
but
you
I also had a rec load. So
Right,
I
and you
did
have
that
to
for a
give it.
period of time. But then and it depends on, here's another, it depends on your organization, your structure, and all of that. So probably my last several organizations, I really didn't have a rec load, so I wasn't recruiting per se. But I love recruiting, so I'm like, I'll give me a rec, I'll take a rec in a heartbeat, even though I may be whatever my title is. So that's not. And so that's where I kind of miss that sometimes. So as an entrepreneur now, or a solopreneur, some of the work I've been doing is some freelance recruiting. Um, And so I like still getting my feet wet and getting in there and doing the things. So that would be for me. So kind of how I don't really see it as I know you use the word tension and I know what you mean by that, but just kind of bridging all the things and making it a nice I guess we just got through the holidays and food, and you just talked about ribs. I'm going to talk about cake.
No,
Just the whole.
don't do it.
Yes, I'm going to do it. The recipe and putting it all together and having everything. So yeah, there's things though. For me, I make it work. With again staying active at least with my license and being involved. I'm active in different nursing organizations, and one of the things that I'm also passionate about is advocacy. And we're not going to go into any kind of political conversation here because that's not the time or place for that. But in general, just advocating for healthcare workforce and things that, and I think that's something that we don't really think about in recruiting, maybe not fully. So that's one thing that I'm doing this a lot through my professional organization, particularly on the nursing side. But
Mhm.
then you mentioned with NACR, which is the National Association for Healthcare Recruitment. One of the things that I'm looking at too is that how we can, as recruiters, be involved in advocacy for workforce.
Interesting. Okay. So,
How are we doing? How do we do on time?
we're almost done. Actually,
Okay.
I was gonna wrap it up and ask if you could stay on for a
Yeah,
few
I can stay
seconds
on. Mhm.
for the after hours. But in parting, to leave everybody, I like to give somebody that might be watching or listening over the weekend, coming up, something to kind of like chew on. And so, hit us with hit us with if someone reads the 24-minute method and just does one thing differently,
Mhm.
what's that single thing that they should, what is that one key takeaway?
I would say the one key takeaway is to be purposeful about your first 24 minutes
Okay.
of your day.
Every day.
Yeah. And maybe, and I know some people do that. They have I was actually talking to someone that says, I block off my first 15 minutes of my day or 15 to 30 minutes in the last 15 to 30 minutes. I'm not going to stop you from doing that. That works for you. But, some people, they just go in with their day. It's like what
Mhm.
you start working, you just go in on your calendar, go in your email, but be very purposeful about how is it that I am going to frame the first 24 minutes of my day. So that would be something I
That's
would
the big
encourage
takeaway.
people to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me. It's been
Yes,
fun. This first
exciting.
day of, or the first Friday, and I guess the first
The
work
first of
day
the
of,
yeah,
yeah,
this
of
is the
the
first
year,
work day of the
2026.
year.
Yeah,
Happens to be a Shalley's Alley, and your
happens to be
first time
Shelley.
as a
Yeah.
guest. Probably not your last time. Um, but folks, yeah, next week we have Tyler Weeks coming in. So join us next week. And until then, please don't forget to join TSI as a member. I did not put that up there, but I probably should. So let me put that up there real quick.
Yeah, get that
Here
up there.
is how you join. Just scan this QR code. If you join, you will get access to exclusive after hours content. Like, for example, an exclusive discount to a book or a course or something like that. And you also get full transcript and notes and extra information from our guests like Angela today. So don't forget to join, and we will see you next week. Be kind to yourselves.
Bye.
Bye bye.